We've got to keep reminding ourselves why the Negro Leagues came into existence in the first place and understand that that was a dark time in the game's past, in the country's past, and we can't forget it. Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Fair Territory, the Monday edition. It will be, I promise you, a jam-packed show. We've got contenders we're going to talk about, some of their needs. We've got the Yankees, we've got the Blue Jays. I want to go back in time, well, at least to last week, talk about the Rickwood Field game and that broadcast. And I would be remiss to start this show without mentioning a Dork of the Week candidate. That would be Edwin Diaz of the New York Mets, who is looking at a 10-game suspension for the sticky stuff, ejected before he even threw a pitch on Sunday night. Edwin Diaz, your team is one of the hottest in Major League Baseball. I love you. You're one of the great people in the game, but this can't happen. Anyway, let's start the show by talking about 5 contenders and their biggest needs. I'm not getting into the massive mediocrity. You can trademark that name for some of the teams that are kind of in that 500 range. I'm talking about 5 really good teams and what they need, just as a way of setting up some of the conversation that we're going to have in the weeks ahead about the deadline. So let's start with these 5 teams. The top 3 here have the same need. Number 1 is going to be the Orioles. And I'm not going in any particular order here, but I'm just talking about these clubs. The Orioles need, more than anything, in my opinion, a starting pitcher. I know they don't have Felix Bautista in the bullpen. Yes, they need that too. But 3 of their starters, Kyle Bradish, John Means, and Tyler Wells, all have undergone season-ending surgeries. Now, the Orioles took 2 of 3 from the Yankees last week without Corbin Burnes and Grayson Rodriguez throwing a single pitch. And then they got swept by the Astros over the weekend with Burnes and Rodriguez in the rotation. The point is, those 2 guys are their big guys. Yes, Cole Irvin has been very good. Dean Kramer is on a rehab assignment. He's coming back. But they need at least 1 more. And it's going to be something that we're going to be talking about in the weeks ahead. Cleveland Guardians, one of the great stories of the season, maybe the best story of the season, honestly, in my opinion. They are in even more trouble with their rotation than the Orioles are. 19th in rotation ERA, and perhaps more important, 27th in innings from their rotation. Only 3 teams with fewer innings from their rotation. The Guardians have Tanner Bybee. He's really good. Ben Lively's been a surprise. Tristan McKenzie's been a disappointment. But at the same time, they've got 2 guys at the back end who probably shouldn't be in their rotation at all. Talking about Logan Allen and Carlos Carrasco. So the Guardians are going to need upgrades. This is a team that kind of acts deliberately. They're not always very aggressive, but in the past, when they have had a chance, they have been aggressive. So I look for them, maybe not to make the Edwin Encarnacion or Josh Donaldson type deal as they have in the past, but to do something for sure to get some help for that rotation. The Brewers, they're an even more extreme example than the Guardians or the Orioles in their need for a starting pitcher and probably multiple starting pitchers. They have an entire rotation on the injured list. Brandon Woodruff, Wade Miley, D.L. Hall, Joe Ross, Robert Gasser. 5 guys. They've got Freddie Peralta, who is an ace. They've got Colin Ray, who has been remarkably steady, I would say. And then they've got a bunch of guys you never expected to see pitching in the Brewers rotation this season. So they too need a starting pitcher. Tobias Myers has been really good. Bryce Wilson has had his moments, but these are guys that are not going to carry you to October, much less help you win in October. Moving on. All right, we'll get off the starting pitching thing for a second. Talk about the Dodgers. They have an offensive need. I don't know where the need is going to be filled, infield, outfield, maybe both. But in the outfield, they're 17th in OPS overall among their outfielders, and that's with Teo Hernandez, well over 800 in OPS. Andy Pages has been better. Jason Hayward has had a good June, but they need at least 1 more. And then in the infield, what happens when Mookie comes back sometime in August? Is he your shortstop? Or do you go get a shortstop, move Mookie to second? If that's not possible, and it might not be possible, not a great shortstop crop that will be available in trade, then do you go with Miguel Rojas at 35, play Mookie at second? And what about Gavin Lux, who, if he was qualified for the league leaders, would have among the lowest OPSs in the majors? I don't know that you can keep going with Gavin Lux looking toward October. And finally, number 5, the Atlanta Braves. With the Braves, we've seen this act before, right? No Ronald Acuna Jr., but this time they don't have Spencer Strider either. So they're going to have needs in the outfield and in the rotation. There's almost no question about that. In the outfield, they can survive if Adam Duvall comes on a little bit, which he hasn't so far. If they get something out of Laureano, who was released by 2 teams this year. Jared Kelenic has been a revelation in the leadoff spot. He looks like he's finally coming into his own to some degree. Michael Harris II is going to come back, but they're going to need an outfielder. And then in the rotation, Spencer Schwellenbach looks like he's stabilized the 5 spot for now. They've got Smith Shawver, who eventually will come back as well. Perhaps Ian Anderson coming off Tommy John surgery. But with 2 older starters, Charlie Morton and Chris Sale. Sale more of an injury-prone starter than older, I would say. And with Strider out, my goodness, you need a little bit more. So those are the 5 teams I picked for this week. They're not the only 5 with needs. We'll talk about them all as we go forward. But it's really interesting to see where the starting pitching market is going to be because the needs are going to outweigh the demand as they often do. Now, 2 other things I want to talk about in this particular segment. The Yankees. Now, the Yankees are interesting right now because, they're going through a little bit of a lull. They've lost some games lately. But the real interesting thing about the Yankees is how they are trying to determine where exactly their needs are going to be at the deadline. They're kind of going through some things right now, in part because of injuries. Anthony Rizzo hurt early last week, Giancarlo Stanton later in the week. So let's look at some of the moves that they've made over the weekend in particular, trying to kind of get some answers in their bullpen. They signed free agent Tim Hill. They added Phil Bickford. They also did some other things as well. They DFA'd Victor Gonzalez, optioned Ron Marinaccio. They brought up Yohannes Gomez, who gave them a little bit of help the other night. They signed Jason Shreve to a minor league contract. All kinds of action going on with the Yankees bullpen. And we'll see what kind of answers they get before the deadline. They've also promoted Ben Rice to play first base. See if he can hold it down until, obviously, Anthony Rizzo returns. And that's the thinking behind getting J.D. Davis as well. Need some options both at first base and third, where DJ LeMahieu, 76 plate appearances since coming off the IL, 0 extra base hits. So the Yankees know they're going to need help in some areas. They're going to see if they can find some answers in the weeks ahead. But ultimately, they know that they'll be hitting the deadline with some particular needs that they're going to need to address. It's just which order, which priority, how badly do you want to go forward in some of these areas. SeatGeek is the official ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, so they have you covered for all of your baseball ticket needs. With over 28 million downloads, they are the #1 rated ticketing app. Baseball season is in full swing and you don't want to miss out. SeatGeek has your tickets to every game and, of course, concerts, festivals, and more. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps. Use our code FAIR, FAIR, for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code FAIR. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. And finally, let's talk about one of our favorite teams here, at least as far as subject matter is concerned. I'm talking about the Toronto Blue Jays, the team that we labeled Paper Tigers last September, and a team that has done nothing to dispel that label in this particular season. They've lost 6 straight, swept by the Red Sox, swept by the Guardians. 8 of 10. They are a team that is in last place in the American League East by 15.5 games. They're 6.5 out in the wild card. And yes, over the weekend, one of their top young prospects, Orelvis Martinez, suspended 80 games for using a performance-enhancing drug. He said it was a fertility thing. He was trying to use a fertility drug that had an illegal substance in. Okay, we've heard it all before. This was a good one, but we've heard it all before. Martinez was kind of important for them because they're trying to mix in some younger hitters here. Spencer Horwitz, Davis Schneider. And these guys, as they look for an offensive spark, were going to be a group and are going to be a group that they kind of lean on a little bit. This is a team that's last in the American League in homers. Last in American League in homers with Vlad Guerrero, with Bo Bichette, George Springer and company. They've given up the second most home runs in the American League, so it's not a good combination. when you're last on the offensive end, next to last on the pitching end, and they're 22nd in the league in ERA, mostly because their bullpen ranks 26th. This team is a massive disappointment. They are heading toward sell territory. Let's not get confused here. This is where they're going to be. The only question is how far do they go? Their potential free agents, Kikuchi and Yimi Garcia, yeah, they could get you something. That's fine. But the Blue Jays, it would seem to me, need a deeper transformation, a greater overhaul. The Blue Jays have a number of starting pitchers that are under contract beyond this season that they could look at trading. Now, I'm not even talking about Bichette and Guerrero Jr. That's another category, and they probably should look at trading them too. But I'm talking about Bassett and Gossman. These are guys you don't want to deal, but in this market, they're going to have great value because of what I had at the top of this segment, talking about the Orioles, Brewers, and Guardians needing starting pitching, and other teams too. Because over the weekend, we saw the Marlins lose Jesus Luzardo. We saw the Angels lose Patrick Sandoval. There is going to be an extreme shortage of starting pitching available. So if you're the Blue Jays, in my opinion, you at least have to look at trading a starter beyond Yusei Kikuchi. If you do that, and you're the general manager, Ross Atkins, and you're the team president, Mark Shapiro, then you're basically admitting that you failed. And Atkins and Shapiro are nearing the ends of their contracts. They're not going to want to admit that they failed. It's a really interesting scenario all around. I don't know which way they're going to go. My guess is they're conservative. They just trade their free agents. That's kind of how they roll. But man, they need to look at a bigger kind of deadline, one in which they sell dramatically and one in which they kind of start over and rebuild around some of these younger players. And keep in mind, Bichette and Guerrero, they're free agents after next season. You're going to have to make a decision on them at some point as well. Time now for the Inside Dish. This is the part of the show where I talk about maybe a story I've written, a trend in the game, or perhaps a big event that recently took place. We had a big event recently take place in Major League Baseball. It was the Rickwood game, the one that took place last Thursday night. Obviously, we had it on Fox, and it was a huge night in the sport, arguably a huge night in the sport's history. Of course, there was a lot going on here, and we had a huge responsibility. Responsibility first because this was a tribute to the Negro Leagues. Also because just 2 days before, Willie Mays had passed, and we wanted to celebrate his career and honor him properly. And we wanted to do justice to Willie and all of the other players from the Negro Leagues, and we wanted to tell their stories properly. Now, you couldn't do all this without touching on why the Negro Leagues existed in the first place. And why did they exist? Well, they existed because black players were not permitted in Major League Baseball until 1947, until Jackie Robinson. And you couldn't tell that story without touching on the greater story of segregation and the difficulty that Negro Leagues players endured in their travel and simply just trying to play the game that they loved. Now, this was tricky, and it was tricky for a number of reasons. First, this was a baseball broadcast. We had a game to cover as well, and not an inconsequential game between the Cardinals and Giants. It was not meant to be just a 3-hour history lesson. That wasn't what we were going to do. It's not the History Channel. We were Fox. And at the same time, we all knew what had to be done, what had to be said. And at various points during the broadcast, pregame and during the game, we touched on the historical elements. Most notable among them was the one moment that went totally viral, the Reggie Jackson interview on the pregame show, in which he gave a searing account of his time in Birmingham as a minor leaguer and what that was like in the 60s as a black man in the South. We also had other elements as well. The Derek Jeter opening with a number of black players talking touched on some of this. Tom Verducci's essay to introduce the game certainly touched on segregation. And in my interview with the Reverend Bill Grierson in the game, we also got into this as well when I asked him what it was like to travel in that time. Some of this was planned. Tom, of course, planned his essay. I planned the interview with the Reverend Grierson and what I wanted to ask him, but not all of it was planned. It's live television. It's not scripted. And the Reggie interview was certainly in that category. Alex Rodriguez on the pregame show asked Reggie a question. And the question was, how emotional is it for you being back in Birmingham? I don't know that Alex got the answer he expected, but he got the answer that we needed. And what Reggie said had a lot of meaning because it was a reminder of all that went down during those times, a reminder of why the Negro Leagues existed, a reminder of the difficulty that these players endured. And that was a heavy moment. Now, from a personal standpoint, in doing what I had to do during the game, some of these interviews, those were a little bit tricky as well. The first one was with Reggie Howard, former Negro Leagues player, and I had two questions to ask him. And on the second question, he kind of went on, and he was enjoying it. He was talking about being back with some of his old teammates and old rivals. And the problem was that I didn't want to interrupt him. And at the same time, I knew we had to get going. The game was about to start. I hopefully handled that properly with the proper respect, but it was tricky. And then with the Reverend Grierson, I would consider that interview one of the highlights of my career, to be perfectly honest. And going into it, I had literally no idea how it was going to go. Reverend Bill Grierson is 99 years old, and I met him and I met Reggie Howard as well before the game, just kind of introduced myself. And I found like it was hard for him to hear me. We didn't really have much of a conversation. And I'm thinking, I don't know how this is going to go. I told our producer, I don't know how this is going to go. And then, as you saw, he could not have been more eloquent. Major League Baseball had told me he had been on the Today Show, he was going to be fine, but this was not a controlled environment. This was out in the crowd, it's noisy, and yet what the Reverend said was so eloquent and so meaningful, it just really struck a chord for a lot of people. Now, through all this, there is a greater concern here. And it's a concern that with the incorporating of Negro League statistics into the official Major League record, and with the Rickwood game, a concern that has been voiced by a lot of people. And the concern basically is that MLB is trying to whitewash history. And Bill Barnwell, in speaking on ESPN's Around the Horn, addressed this matter rather pointedly.
Feels a lot like Major League Baseball wants to theme park away the racist elements of their past and the past of baseball. We saw a celebration of baseball in Birmingham, which is great, but did not actually reckon with the racism that was inherent there. It feels like Major League Baseball, if they really cared about this issue, if they really want to change things and create an openness, giving people spaces to tell their stories is incredibly valuable.
I don't know that I agree with it. First of all, we did allow people to tell their stories on Fox, and that was part of what was going on here. That's part of Major League Baseball on this particular night, right? We're the broadcasters. Bob Kendrick was on for multiple innings. I mentioned all the other elements that we had. The league's intent here actually is pretty good, in my opinion. Trying to recognize those players by incorporating their statistics, having this game where we can go through all of this. But certainly, what Bill Barnwell is saying there is a legitimate concern. If there's anything we take out of this game, out of that night, which was a special night, it's that we need to keep talking. We need to educate ourselves. We need to remind ourselves of just what happened in that era in which the Negro Leagues existed, in which they had no choice but to exist if black players wanted to play baseball. If we're going to go forward here, if we're going to make true progress, and I know we've made a ton of progress over the years, but I don't know that anyone would suggest we're all the way there. If we're going to get to that point where we're kind of truly enlightened, we've got to keep talking. We've got to keep educating ourselves. We've got to keep reminding ourselves why the Negro Leagues came into existence in the first place, and understand that that was a dark time in the game's past, in the country's past, and we can't forget it. We'll be back after a quick message from Foul Territories, Scott Braun and Eric Kratz.
Kratz here from FT. I wasn't feeling as focused as I wanted to be and heard some buzz about AG1. Since drinking AG1 daily, I've felt energized, locked in, and ready to hit the day.
Braun here. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a better, smarter way to elevate your baseline health. Kratz, not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. That's a big deal for me.
I recommend AG1 to fam and friends because it's tested for 950 contaminants and NSF certified for sport.
Kratz, we're both traveling a lot too, and those travel packs are clutch. I drink AG1 daily to support gut health so that we can dominate the day. So if there's one product to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1, and that's why we're excited to welcome them as a new partner to the FT network. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/foul. Go check it out.
Time now for Grillin Ken, the part of the show where you guys get to ask me questions. Let's get right to it. First one comes from Stephen Campbell, who asks, as another American League team, should I be concerned about the Astros, or is this just a hot week for them? Interesting question from Stephen. I don't know which team he represents, but it's a question that is quite relevant. The Astros are on a bit of a roll here. They've won 5 straight, just swept the Orioles. They're 13-7 in June. And even with all their starting pitching injuries, they look like they might be coming around a little bit. And it's interesting, the Rangers are the same way. They're playing a little bit better. They got Max Scherzer back yesterday. But the question is about the Astros. And yes, I believe other American League teams should be concerned because this is a team with a history, with a recent past of great performance and championship play. So are the Astros good enough right now to catch the Mariners in the AL West? Probably not. But I do expect them to be buyers. I don't think they're going to sell. That's been something that's been pretty much ruled out by their general manager, Dana Brown, already. And I don't really expect him going back on that, although it's possible. And Joel Sherman of the New York Post had an interesting column this week pointing out that certain teams over the years, we never expected to be sellers. They didn't announce they were going to be sellers, and suddenly they were sellers. It's just not in the Astros' DNA. So to answer your question, Stephen, yes, the rest of the American League should be concerned. Maybe not overly concerned, but the Astros are playing better. The next question, this one's quite interesting too. It comes from Primetime, not Deion Sanders, but Primetime SC2, who asked, will Royce Lewis be an all-star? Now, Royce Lewis has had an amazing season so far. Unfortunately, he has played only 18 games, 66 at-bats, but you see all the highlights here. He's got 10 home runs, several of them quite dramatic. So should he be an all-star? Well, if he's healthy, I'd like to see him in the game. And I've had this conversation on Foul Territory, most recently with Jason Kipnis. And it's an interesting conversation because guys like Kipnis look at this and say, wait, a guy like this, a guy like Paul Skeens, for example, not enough at-bats, not enough innings to really be all-stars this year. There's no limit, no minimum that we're talking about. The fans can vote in whoever they want. That's one thing. So can the players. And the commissioner's office can add whoever they want when all is said and done as well. Generally, you'd like to see a little bit more production or a little bit more playing time than Royce Lewis has done, even Paul Skeens. But I said this to Jason on the show. My feeling is this game is about stars. It's about entertainment. It's not always about the most meritorious picks, because if it was, we wouldn't always get the best choices. And when you have a rule that says every team must be represented, we're away from that already. So, yeah, I want to see the stars. Royce Lewis has a couple of more weeks here. If he keeps doing this, he's got to be in the game. Paul Skeens has to be in the game. And Jason made the point, well, if you do this, if you put guys like this in, then some other deserving players are going to get left out. But as I said then, my goodness, we end up with about 80 all-stars every year. Once the guys start falling by the wayside, whether it's injury, whether they back out, one thing or another, everyone gets a participation trophy, it seems. So I don't worry so much about that. I want to see the most exciting, best players in the game. And frankly, Royce Lewis and Paul Skeens right now are 2 of those. All right, final question. This one comes from Tom. Tom asks, can Ohtani win MVP as just a DH? This question is becoming more relevant by the day, especially with the Mookie Betts injury. Now, there has never been a player win MVP exclusively as a DH. You can say, well, Ohtani did. No, he was a pitcher too when he won those 2 MVPs. So if he does it this year, yes, it would be exclusively as a DH. Marcell Ozuna is right there with him, not right there, but pretty close to him in OPS, and he's having an MVP type season too for the Braves, but Ohtani's having the better season. Can he do it? I don't know. David Ortiz, was a top 5 finisher 5 straight years from 2003 to 2007. We've seen other DHs finish in the top 5. Frank Thomas, Victor Martinez, I believe, did one year. And most recently, Yordan Alvarez finished 3rd just a couple of years ago. But it's going to be a big reach for voters to vote a DH MVP. It's just not likely in this age of wins above replacement when we look at offense and defense and base running, the overall player, more carefully than we once did. Ohtani, once again, is going to test the boundaries. And if anyone can do this, it's him. I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank everyone for listening. Thanks for your questions as well. You know where to find us. I say this every week. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Like us, subscribe to us, and most important, join us again when we return on Fair Territory Thursday, this time with Alana Rizzo.
Once a day, you can play the free BetMGM Swing for the Fences game. Chance to win daily prizes. You play as the batter, you pick an area of the strike zone, and then you see what happens. And BetMGM Sportsbook account holders who play the game will have the opportunity to win a reward if they get a hit. Rewards include odds boost tokens, parlay boost tokens, and bonus bets, among other rewards. And all of those rewards, when you get them, expire in 24 hours.
Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.